there's been a chess controversy about cheating and so on that you've covered. People should subscribe to your channel. You're hilarious, entertaining, brilliant, and it's just fun to learn from you. Do you think, as we stand now, Hans ever cheated in over the board chess? What as things stand now at the beginning of October?
Yeah, that's a very tough question for a couple of reasons. I think first of all, when people refer to evidence in regards to whether Hans cheated over the board, there is not, and I don't think there ever will be, quote unquote, hard evidence. The only thing that would ever constitute that is if he's caught in the act. Literally, he's caught like using a phone with an earpiece, whatever it might be. That is the only way that there would ever be hard evidence. So, as it stands right now, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence. How much of it is legitimate or not remains to be seen. I know people have questioned the statistics. Some people think it's very convincing. Some people think it's complete nonsense. I think that right now I'm very undecided, but I do feel that within the next like 3 to 6 months, assuming Hans is able to play over the board in more tournaments, the stats will make it very clear one way or the other based on his results whether it's legitimate or not. I think for me, I would say that regardless of whether like I believe he cheated or not, he is playing at probably a 20. He's probably at least 2,650, no matter what. Regardless of whether he's cheating or not, he's already at that level, which is very, very high. So I think the stats will bear it out in the next probably. I said 3 to 6 months. Probably I would say next 6 to 12 months. Whether something happened, but I really don't know.
Do you find compelling or interesting the kind of analysis where you compare the correlation between engines and humans to try to determine if cheating was done in part?
So initially, I thought that was actually quite legitimate, but as I found out much more recently, anybody can basically upload this data. So that whole theory, while it seemed very convincing at the time, it simply isn't any statistical evidence in my opinion now. But there are games from some of those tournaments that definitely, considering where his rating was, look very suspicious in 2020, I would say. Again, that's not the role of like myself to decide or chess.com. That's obviously going to be up to FIDE, whether they think that's compelling evidence or not. I think for me, what I would say from an intuitive standpoint is that I've been in this world for a very, very long time. I've seen most of the juniors as they've risen through the ranks, Magnus and many others. And there's always been something about them that has stood out to me. That's been like a brilliant game they've played against someone who's much higher rated. I've just seen it from all of those players. I never really saw that with Hans Niemann. So it's very difficult for me to sort of, with my own two eyes, being in this chess world so long, see things a certain way. And then like something that's never happened before is happening. But at the end of the day, it is still possible. It is completely possible that Hans, something clicked at a certain age and he started improving in spite of the fact that, the statistics look weird in terms of his rating improvement. So I don't know. I think that in 6 to 12 months, I'll probably be able to say one way or the other with very certain confidence, like, whether he should be there or not.
Speaking of statistics, I should ask, I'm not sure about this. Are you a data scientist?
Right. That's a good one. No, of course I'm not. But that's the thing. You see all these stats are thrown out there, and you try to understand what's being said. But it's also very scary because when you see these things that look very legitimate and then they're disproven, or people say like you're cherry picking like the dates and all these other things, it almost feels like you can come to any conclusion that you want to.
Yeah.
And that's why I think this is such a serious issue for the world of chess, because going forward, if we don't take it seriously now, I think at some point there is the potential for a much, much larger scandal.
Do you agree that, like with Magnus, I think, said that it is an existential threat to chess? Like, this is a very serious problem that's only going to get bigger because you're basically, from a spectator perspective, from a competitor perspective, are not sure that you can trust any of the results.
Yeah, I think that's for sure true. When I think back to the last like 5 to 10 years, there are plenty of top level tournaments that I played in where there was no security at all.
Yeah.
You would just go into the auditorium and play your games, and that was that. So I do think it's a big issue. I think it has been a big issue, but the reason it's only coming to light now is because it features a very strong junior player who's very close to the world's elite. There have been many cheating scandals before. There was this French player, Sebastian Feller. There was this player, Igor Zrauzis from Latvia. There was this, I think it's from Belarus, or maybe I have that wrong. Maybe it was Bulgaria. Borislav Ivanov as well. Those are three big cheating scandals, but they were not at the absolute top levels of chess, which I think is why it never became the huge news story that this is, or it wasn't viewed in the same kind of way. Is why I think organizers were perhaps a little bit too lax in terms of security.
So you said 2,650. Is it possible that Hans is in fact a kind of Bobby Fischer level of genius, and he's capable at times of genius at the chessboard?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. That is absolutely possible. I think that's why I think for everybody in the situation, we want to see what happens in the next 6 to 12 months, because I think it will be very clear. Also, it's very interesting to me because there are other stats from that 72-page report that chess.com compiled, which in essence say certain other junior players basically have peaked, that they're not likely to improve further. So it's also going to be very interesting when you look at those, like, I think it was like 50 pages of graphs, because there are graphs that say like some of the other junior players are done. So when we look forward, like in a year or two, if those players don't improve, it will also say something about their methods as well that they've used to sort of compile this data.
Yeah, I wonder what those junior players do if they look at that data. So there's a point where you should look at yourself like practically, like what is the actual empirical data over the past year of how much I've improved at a particular thing. Like it's one thing to kind of tell yourself that these are the ways I need to improve, and it's another to actually look at the data and face the reality of it.
Right. I think also that could have a psychological effect. That is the other thing that makes the whole Han situation so tough, because if you think that he's cheated or you're unsure about what's going on, that is another psychological factor whenever you play against him.
In his favor or
Definitely
against
in his
him?
favor. Definitely in his favor. Because, for example, if I go online and play against a computer, let's just say I go play against Stockfish tomorrow, I'm going to play a very certain type of opening strategy, try to keep the board closed, and maybe hope to get lucky. Now, computers have gotten so good that generally even that doesn't, I don't even have a chance, even with such strategies. But you play differently than you normally would. And so if you're playing a game against him and there's a move that looks really weird, it doesn't seem logical at all, that can also start to affect you, where you immediately make a mistake, or you start questioning yourself. You start thinking, well, what's going on here? Is there something unbecoming? Like you start worrying about what is happening. And so it definitely is, it's a very tough situation.
Do you agree with Magnus's decision to forfeit the match, his most recent match with Hans?
Tough question. I don't, in my heart of hearts, I feel like there had to be a better way to handle it than what Magnus did. On the other hand, sort of being in this world of top grandmasters, having heard these rumors for 2 years, I think that the fact that it was blown off and it wasn't treated seriously, I'm not sure if there was a better option. So in my heart of hearts, I feel like there had to be a better way to handle it. But in practicality, like in the practical world, I think he might have made the only decision where it became a big issue.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would have loved to see just where 100% it's certain that there's no cheating involved, that they play a bunch of games.
Yeah, I think there was actually an article that was released today by Ken Rogoff, who is a grandmaster at chess, where he wrote this article in the Boston Globe, and he essentially said that, like, have Hans and Magnus play a match and see what his score is, because statistically, if it's above a certain percentage, that means he's legitimate, because of course you have security. If it's below, that probably means that he's not at the level that he's at. So I don't know if that's a real way to settle it necessarily, because also for Magnus, to ask him to play against someone who's cheated, I think for him, he would never entertain the idea, because it's like, why am I going to play against someone who cheated? So
yeah,
I don't know. It's very tough. And you know, the one other thing I would say on the topic that's really important to note is this sort of came from left field for most of the people who are in the general public or very casual chess players. But this is not something that wasn't known, wasn't even on the radar. I think this has not been said before, but there's one of these things where they talk about how Hans has he played better during a period of time when games were broadcast versus not broadcast. Yeah. I actually heard this rumor 2 years ago during one of the tournaments he's playing specifically. So that is the thing, is that this has been out there for a very long time, and so it's hard, because you do believe that Magnus could have handled it better, but if it was 2 years of these rumors and nothing was done about it, I don't know.
And for people who don't understand, when it's broadcast, it's easier to cheat, because you can have it removes one of the challenges of cheating, which is the one-way communication from the board to the engine. here the engine can just watch the broadcast, and then all you have to do is send signals right back.
Right.
I mean, that's really, I woken up to this fact, actually programmed. So setting all the silly sex toys aside, I have a bunch of these devices. So like this is the size of a coin,
Mhm.
and it has a high resolution vibration that you can send. So you can just have this in your pocket. It's basically what your smartphone has ability to vibrate. You can do programmatic communication through anything. Bluetooth is the easiest. So like this made me wonder, like, wait a minute, how often does this happen?
Mhm.
Like at every level of play. And you said this only became a huge concern for at the highest level of play, but then how much cheating is going on at like the middle level of play, especially when more money is involved. So in the game of poker, when like it really made me think like the future will have devices like this much easier to, like, you will engineer smaller and smaller and smaller devices that have onboard compute
Mhm.
that like this is the future. I mean, I just, it makes me I think probably with all kinds of cybersecurity, that means the defense will just have to start to get better. Even with chess, it seems like the security is very clumsy. Just looking the scanning of the recent tournament.
One thing you'll see is that a lot of people are talking about whether Hans is cheated or not.
Yeah,
The one thing that almost nobody is doing is actually like trying to show how it can be done.
yeah,
Everyone's basically avoiding that. And I think the single biggest reason for that is simply because it can be done very easily at like a weekend tournament. If you play a weekend tournament where the top prize is $100 and the players are maybe master level, somebody could already do this. Because even in St. Louis now, where they have the security, my understanding is the non-linear junction device they bought cost about $11,000. And organizers, if you have a weekend tournament at the local club, you don't have $11,000 to spend on such a device. And so that is why a lot of people have been talking about it, but I think it is very, very serious. And that's why it is good, even if, aside from Hans, even, it is a very important question or debate to be having at the present moment
well,
in time.
I think it's good to talk about it, right? To make
Mhm.
it so that the defenses will really step up. I think you could do pretty cheap, like the security, pretty cheaply. But
Yeah,
you have to, you take it seriously.
right, of course. And again, we'll see what happens. I think that's going to end up being on FIDE more than anyone else
Yeah.
to try and do that. I don't think asking the organizers to do it. I mean, I feel like FIDE, they are the governing body. It will be on them at the end of the day to figure it out. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of months.